In 2025, a new financial war is taking shape, but it's not what you might expect. It's a war not fought with missiles, tanks, or soldiers, but with something much more powerful: currencies. For decades, the US dollar has been the global standard, the undisputed king of money. But now, a growing alliance of nations is challenging that dominance. BRICS, a coalition of 5 emerging economies, is making its move. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, countries with a combined population of over 3 billion people. These nations are tired of being controlled by the US dollar. They want financial independence and are willing to do whatever it takes to get it. The first sign of this shift came quietly in the background. Countries started trading with each other in their own currencies, bypassing the dollar altogether. Oil deals were struck in yuan, Russian rubles, and Indian rupees. Slowly, the US dollar's dominance began to fade. But it wasn't until 2022 that the world started to take notice. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the US imposed sanctions that froze billions of dollars in Russian reserves. That was a game changer. Suddenly, every country realized just how fragile their dollar reserves really were. If the US could freeze the assets of an entire nation, what was stopping it from doing the same to others? The message was clear: trust in the dollar is no longer guaranteed. This was the opening BRICS needed. For years, they had quietly discussed alternatives to the dollar. Now they could act. The first move was to push for new trade agreements. Instead of using dollars, they would use their own currencies. This wasn't just a small shift. It was the beginning of a global reset. BRICS nations weren't just rejecting the dollar. They were building a new financial system. China, with its vast reserves, began buying gold at record rates. Brazil and India followed suit, hoarding precious metals as a hedge against dollar collapse. Central banks across the world started diversifying their reserves away from dollars. And suddenly, the world wasn't as dependent on the US as it once was. The next move came in 2023 when BRICS announced plans for a new payment system. A rival to SWIFT, the network that powers international bank transfers. This new system would allow BRICS countries to bypass US-controlled financial channels entirely. At first, the US shrugged it off. After all, they had the world's reserve currency, and no one could challenge that, right? But by 2024, the dollar was already losing ground. Nations like Saudi Arabia and Argentina began negotiating oil deals in yuan and other local currencies. The US realized it was losing control, and fast. But the challenge didn't stop there. BRICS wasn't just about currencies and trade agreements. It was about reshaping the entire financial landscape. They wanted a new global reserve currency, one not tied to the US dollar, a currency backed by real assets, commodities, gold, oil, and more. A currency with tangible value, unlike the US dollar, which was backed only by trust. This wasn't just a dream. It was becoming a reality. BRICS countries began setting up alternative payment methods, bypassing the traditional banking system. They even established gold-backed financial systems to ensure their economic stability. This is what makes BRICS so dangerous to the dollar. They're not just trying to undermine the dollar. They're building a completely new system. And they're doing it faster than anyone expected. But why is this happening now? The US has been the world's financial leader for decades. The dollar was the backbone of global trade. But over the last few years, cracks have started to appear. The US has been running massive deficits, printing trillions of dollars. Debt has skyrocketed to unimaginable levels. By 2025, the US national debt has exceeded $36 trillion. Interest payments alone are swallowing up a massive portion of the government's budget. The Federal Reserve is printing money at an unprecedented rate, causing inflation to rise. The dollar is losing purchasing power. And other countries are noticing. BRICS sees this as their moment. They see the US as an empire in decline, unable to maintain its dominance. And they are moving quickly to fill the void. The first step is to create a viable alternative to the dollar, a currency that isn't tied to a single country's debt. A currency that isn't subject to inflation caused by reckless spending. That currency, according to BRICS, could be a new digital currency, a digital reserve currency backed by real-world assets. It would be decentralized, not controlled by any one nation. And it could disrupt the dollar's grip on the global economy. But the rise of BRICS has sent shockwaves through the global financial system. For decades, The US dollar was the bedrock of international trade. Now that bedrock is cracking. The world is looking for alternative, and BRICS is more than happy to provide it. As countries move away from the dollar, the US is facing a critical dilemma. Will they change their policies or double down on their dollar dominance? A key factor in this shift is the loss of confidence in the dollar. Countries no longer see the dollar as a safe bet. They're looking for stability elsewhere. BRICS is capitalizing on this distrust by offering a new financial system. A system not controlled by the US and not subject to the whims of Washington politics. At the heart of this new system is a digital currency backed by real-world assets. This is the next evolution in global finance. It's decentralized and secure, offering a way to bypass traditional financial institutions. As BRICS grows, so does its ability to challenge the US dollar. In the past, the dollar was seen as untouchable. But now it's under siege from a coalition of emerging economies. This isn't just a financial issue. It's a geopolitical one. Countries are choosing sides. Will they back the US dollar, or will they align with BRICS? The power dynamics are shifting, and the US is losing ground. The global economy is at a crossroads, and the future of the US dollar is uncertain. But what happens if the dollar loses its global reserve currency status? The impact would be devastating. The US would lose its ability to print money at will. Interest rates would soar, and inflation would skyrocket. The dollar would lose its dominance in global trade. Nations would turn to alternative currencies for trade and investment. The US would no longer have the luxury of printing money to cover its debts. The entire financial system would change, and the US would be forced to adapt or face collapse. But there's more at stake than just the dollar. The US military's global dominance is also tied to the dollar. The military ensures the dollar's place as the world's reserve currency. Without military power backing it, the dollar would lose its place at the top. BRICS understands this dynamic. They know that currency control and military power go hand in hand. This is why their challenge to the dollar is so significant. They're not just creating a new currency. They're creating a new power structure. A world where the US isn't the sole superpower. And a world where the dollar no longer dictates global trade. The US is fighting to keep its place at the top. But BRICS is relentless. Every move the US makes, BRICS counters with another strategic advance. This is the beginning of a new financial era. And the question is, who will emerge victorious? The US has built its empire on the dollar. But as the world moves away from the dollar, the US is left vulnerable. BRICS offers a more stable, diversified, and trustworthy financial system. And countries around the world are taking notice. If the US can't maintain its grip on the dollar, it risks losing everything. The financial system the US built over the last 100 years could collapse. The BRICS coalition is offering an alternative, one that could reshape the global financial landscape for good. The dollar is in danger, and the US needs to decide how to respond. Will they cling to the past, or will they adapt to the future? The choice isn't easy, but it's a choice that will determine the fate of the global economy. If the US loses its grip on the dollar, it loses its power. BRICS is offering a new vision of the world. A world where the US isn't the only game in town. And this shift is happening faster than anyone anticipated. The BRICS nations are already making moves, and the US is struggling to keep up. The world is moving toward a multipolar financial system, and BRICS is leading the way. The US can't afford to ignore this challenge. They need to act fast or they risk being left behind. The US must find a way to protect the dollar status. But that may be easier said than done. The US is facing increasing competition from BRICS, and every move the US makes is countered by BRICS advances. The financial war between the two powers is just beginning. And the stakes couldn't be higher. This is not just a battle for